I'll tell you one thing. One time I had to watch, I told you, I think, I was, here we are, I had to watch a movie about some Sydney gangsters. And it was in America, and it was on in Hollywood. It was on a special showing down in Sunset Strip, and I went to it, and they had what do you call the words on the bottom? What do you call that?
Oh, the
The
subtitles.
subtitles for the Americans.
Yeah.
I needed the subtitles. I'd been so long listening to American voices, I couldn't understand Australians. It was so funny. Anyway, now I'm on among Australians. Okay, you people. Good
So,
evening. Good.
Venerable, a very
Yes.
warm welcome. Of course,
Thank
we'd
you.
like to start again with the acknowledgement of country and offering
Yes.
you a varied mandala. So
Good,
I'm going to
wonderful.
put the screen share up,
Okay.
and you know, here in Australia, it can be tempting to think, oh yeah, we were discovered 200 years ago, but that's so patently not true. We
Patently.
actually, you know, Australia's had people looking after the land for at least 40,000 years, and we're just the interlopers. You know, we're kind of on stolen land, but in my mind, it's not actually stolen unless we've determined not to give it back. So I'm thinking of it as borrowed land with the intention of,
There you go.
you know, working towards a treaty. But meanwhile, what we do, we acknowledge and pay respect to the Jagera and Turrbal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land which Langri Centre resides on. And we pay our respects to the elders, past, present and emerging, and in particular welcome all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students to the centre with great respect and great gratitude, and a thank you for your patience. And then we'd like to offer Venerable Robina a mandala. So those of you who have a mandala offering, we've been learning how to make the mandala offerings, and what's really
Look at Francis.
nice about
What
it,
have
I
you
just
got,
got
Francis?
an email from one of the students, Venerable Robina, saying, I did my first grown-up mandala offering the other day.
And there's Francis with her flowers. Look at her.
Oops, I've got what's called an enthusiastic mandala. It's jumping off over onto the screen to you. So all of us will be offering this. This ground anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru for continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha field and offer. May all living beings enjoy this pure land. So we offer this to you, Venerable Robina,
Okay,
as
thank
a
you. I'll
request
receive
for
it.
the teachings
Thank
today.
you, darling.
Idam Guru Rana Mandala Kamniyatayami.
Wonderful. Good, good, good. Thank you so much. And all the Buddhas rejoice as well. They all received it. So that's wonderful. So, you people, that's it. So we'll sing a little prayer. We'll start this. I'll start this one, reminding us of what we're going to do together today. Thinking why we're. So, first part is reminding us of our reliance on the Buddha and his teachings, and the second part is stating this marvelous altruistic long-term motivation or purpose, if you like. We'd say, what's our purpose? Why are we together? Well, it's to listen to these teachings. That includes me, I promise. So we can develop our amazing potential, so we can benefit all sentient beings, no matter how long it takes. Sangye chodang tsoke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chonyen gipa sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog. Sangye chodang tsoke chognam la jancho badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chonyen gipa sonam ki drola penche sangye dropa shog. So what we're saying is, until we are enlightened, we will rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, and so the Buddha, his teachings, and our marvelous spiritual community. And so, by the virtuous karmic seeds, because of the power of the virtuous karmic seeds, we drop into our bank vaults by listening to these teachings. May they ripen as our Buddhahood, no matter how long it takes. So then we're qualified to benefit all others. That's what we said. Okie dokie. But we have to remember what we talked about last week. And I mean, I've said so many things since then because I never stopped talking, but I forget. So anybody, I think we should start with some questions. I think that would be a good idea. Start with some questions.
Venerable, I've already actually got a question into the chat, but I like
bet you have, Miffy. You're the best question asker in the world.
You know, in the first week you were kind of talking about how when the wheels fall off and how to actually notice before the wheels fall off.
Yes.
And then last week it was kind of about mental gardening, you know, how to tell whether what we have is a herb or a weed. And I found that really useful just to even frame it like that.
Yes.
And so there's a couple of questions. So there's already one. So people are keen, Venerable.
Good.
So the first one, what's the most skillful way to respond, if we're a Buddhist, to somebody's anger when the anger in particular manifests as passive aggression or being super tight and controlling?
Yes.
Especially if they don't even know, or recognize what's going on in their own mind. So calling it out or kind of dealing with it, head on can often have disastrous consequences. So what's the best approach?
I think this is the thing. This is really, there are the two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. So this is the compassion wing. Every time now put it a different way. Okay. If we think of the wisdom wing and the compassion wing as a way of encompassing all the advice in the Dharma, all the way from here to Buddhahood. So the wisdom wing, which is the very first level, is learning to control the body and the speech, learning to control the servants of our mind, okay? That's absolutely the first one. That's the very first level, and it's logical. If we can't control the body and the speech, which are driven by our own anger, our own fears, our own attachment, our own anxiety, our own attachment. That's what drives it all. But the servants of those states of mind are what make the mess. They're the things that also help others. So our body and speech, the wisdom wing, the emphasis of the wisdom wing is, the answer to the question from the wisdom wing point of view is, to make sure I don't say or do something to hurt the other person. This is almost too simple for words, because I don't want to hurt myself. I want to control my body and speech so I don't make a mess, so that I don't hurt myself, so that in turn I don't hurt the other person. So the wisdom wing is 90% of the time, we haven't got that down yet. This is junior school and high school. We can't control our body and speech. Because why? So it's catch-22. We don't control our body and speech because we don't know what's going on in our mind. And then if we can't control our body and speech first, we'll never know what's going on in our mind. So the wisdom wing answer is to watch yourself like a hawk and to be cautious so you don't keep sowing negative seeds in your mind by making a mess. Now, the compassion wing is necessarily more advanced. That implies you've got some handle on your body, on your own body, speech and mind, so that when you hear this other person say a certain thing, you've got enough common sense, you've got enough wisdom to know what's going on so that you know the wisest answer that will be of benefit to them. So it's either you control your body and speech in order to make sure you don't harm others or harm yourself. And even more fundamental, the wisdom wing is to ensure that you don't do or say something that'll make a mess of you, then in turn which harms others. So that's the first one. So if you don't know how to, if you're feeling your mind roiling up, or you feel you want to burst out with some words, at least control your body and speech. I mean, this is so profound. And I think most of us as Buddhists, we've been even practicing for 97 years, we haven't even begun to do this one yet. We can't control our body and speech. We can't control our speech. We just vomit out whatever we feel. And then the damage is done, So the first level of practice is to control your body and speech. It's so powerful. Then if you've got some wisdom and the person's on the other end and you've got a sense of what's going on, then you'll have enough common sense and to be able to say or do whatever will be of benefit to that person. So now, maybe there is zero you can say or do that will benefit them. So you just find a way to be kind. I mean, this almost sounds too simplistic, but it's profound. So I don't know if you want more questions from that. Miffy can unpack it for you. She's very good at that, and ask them questions from that. because this is 90% of the problem. You see, in our culture, we think we call it sharing. What we mean is we vomit on each other all day. We actually call it good because we've got no control, and we want to manipulate the other person to do what I want, to say what I want. We want to point out their mistakes. I mean, it's just so intense, and we get so confused. And part of the problem is we haven't got a clue what's our stuff and what the other person's stuff is. So with this beginnings to practice, to harness our body and speech, which is why you first start your practice by, living in vows, doing your purification every day, you're harnessing your behavior. I mean, this is the hardest one. This is my hardest one in my life. At some point, I remember I was with Lama Yeshe. I've been a nun for like 20 years or something. No, it can't have been then. It was only 10. Even less. And I remember feeling all sorry for myself because I blurt out of my mouth and I'm a troublemaker. Not only a troublemaker, but part of me. And I was all self-piteous. And Lama just said to me, nothing wrong with your heart, dear. It's just your behavior. So if we can control our behavior, I mean, then 90% of the battle is done. But that doesn't mean repressing. It doesn't mean, some people don't ever say a word, but you're suppressing what you feel. So that implies you be cautious with what you say. Then now, how to benefit the other person, that implies you have to know their mind. I mean, if you've got a 2-year-old in front of you, you've got to know where they're at so you can help them. If they're, you've got to know the other person to some degree. That's why the compassion wing is more advanced. If I don't even know my own mind and can't control my body and speech, I can't even see the other person in front of me. All I do is see a person who's being mean to me and I just burst out, So it's not that easy. But if you want to help another person by what you say, you've got to have enough wisdom to know their mind. And 90% of the time, the advice we like to give people is just our own rubbish, So I don't know if that's helpful, but it's kind of, you've got to unpack a lot of this stuff,
Yeah, so there's a couple of questions that come from this, Venerable. So one of them is that when you said about like the work for ourselves is working on the wisdom wing, and the work, for others is the compassion wing.
Yes.
That's really quite different from, say, our Western point of view that talks about self-care all the time.
Right.
That I must admit
Exactly.
kind of creeps me out a little bit. So what's the difference here?
It's unbelievably hugely different, and it's hard to hear it initially. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of ourselves and having a massage and having a weep and talking to our friends, and that's good. We need to relax because we're not bodhisattvas yet who can work day and night. But the whole point of the wisdom wing isn't just a question of taking care of yourself, meaning have a massage and a weep. And nothing wrong with that. The work of working on yourself is the hardest work of all. It's subduing my body and my speech so I don't vomit over everybody, and then so I can learn to go to high school, the second scope, and begin to unpack and unravel my thoughts and feelings and emotions. And this is the nuts and bolts of being a Buddhist. Then it's easy to help others. Working on yourself means becoming less angry, less depressed, less attached, less jealous, working on your practice, doing your prostrations, doing your purification, living in your vows. It's sort of like really hard work. So a simple analogy would be, and it's not that complicated when we think of ordinary things like how to teach a person how to play tennis, how to teach a person how to bake a cake. Well, think of the tennis one. How can I help? The commonest question people ask me, how can I help my daughter with her anger? How can I help my son with his jealousy? Do you understand? That's the helping others. Well, the obvious answer is, it's like you're asking me, how do I help my son play tennis? Well, the answer is evident. You have to learn tennis first. That's the wisdom wing. That's what it means, taking care of yourself. How can I just leap in and help my poor son play tennis if I don't even know what a tennis racket is? So how can I help him with his anger if I haven't dealt with my anger? That's what taking care of myself is. It means doing your own training. It means getting out there, doing your own training, controlling your body, controlling your speech, learning to play tennis. Then I'm qualified to help others. So it's not just having a massage and a weep, and that's fine. Add that to it. But it means working on yourself, turning yourself into this marvelous person, becoming a disciplined person, having a practice, working every day, controlling your speech, live in vows, don't kill, don't steal, don't lie. You're harnessing your body, speech, and mind. As Lama Zopa says, we can mold our mind into any shape we like. This is what we're trying to do here. It's tough work to play tennis. It's tough work to become a good cook. But then you're qualified to help others. That's the wisdom wing. It's powerful, and it's profoundly different. We don't have this system we don't have this approach in our world. We don't think you can grow love and compassion. We don't think we can train ourselves into being more loving and more compassionate. We don't think that. So that's why we're so limited, and that's why we get mental breakdown and get burnout and all those words when we help others, because we haven't worked on our own mind. This is, when we realize this, it's really quite profound.
And so then, Venerable, there is something also that happens, that when we, we internalize our emotions, or we make sure that we don't just spew them out on everybody else and kind of suppress them.
Yeah.
I suppose then, because the heat of the moment is gone, then we don't do anything with them. So
That's the
how do
problem.
we actually then,
That's the problem.
as Judy says, deeply manage our emotions?
I know. There's more to it than that. You've got the person who's, some people have good behavior, okay, and I don't mean that in a sarcastic way. I think it's brilliant that you're born due to past karma. You've got good disciplined behavior. You don't shout. You're always kind to people. You're not rude. You don't do bad things to harm other people. This is so special, and you should really admire. But it often happens that a person like that doesn't know what's going on in their mind, and they are suppressing because there's attachment there as well, to be seen as a good girl. Some people are really good girls, but it's driven often by, we've all got attachment, so it's driven by your attachment to be seen as a good girl, and you'll never say the wrong thing, you'll never do the wrong thing, you'll always be mummy's helper. Don't criticize the good part, but the negative side is, because it's driven by your attachment, then you're suppressing your anger. Many people don't even know their anger until they're 97 and they finally have a mental breakdown. So either in our culture, you vomit it all out, and I'm one of those, or you're a really nice girl. There's the third model. The third mode is this: making a decision first to discipline yourself, live in vows, and you work on your body, you work on your speech, you control them. But with awareness, you make a conscious decision: I will not say bad words. You make a conscious decision: I will not lie, not steal, not eat. And then eventually you decide it implies you won't eat 14 pieces of cake and all the rest, and don't have to watch 5 hours of video games or porno, only one. So you begin to subdue your body and speech. But the point is it's conscious. It's a conscious decision of your mind to control your body and speech. Then, because you're practicing making conscious decisions, now you're capable of making conscious decisions to unpack and unravel your mind. So you're conscious. So then a person like me, who's learned a little bit to control my behavior over all these 47 years or whatever it is, 42, whatever, I won't just vomit out now. I won't, but I'm not suppressing. It's because also you've changed your mind. You've reconfigured my interpretation of the world. You see, we set in our culture, another point is so important. We think anger, jealousy, depression are these solid, physical-based emotions that are set in stone. But when we start to understand the Buddhist view, as we've been talking, that's just the physical symptom. They are just the physical manifestations of the conceptual stories that are deep down in our mind that we don't even notice until you are inert in bed and can't get out with depression, or because you're vomiting all over the place. They're the tip of the iceberg. So when we start the job of first living in vows and doing our purification every day, that we put atomic bombs under these old habits. We're making conscious decisions not to make a mess, conscious decisions not to lie, steal, kill, jump on somebody else's partner. This has an effect over all of your behavior, and you learn to become in control of your behavior. It becomes more effortless. You're not suppressing. We see it as so concrete in the West. Then you have this luxury to go into your mind by doing meditation every day and by being your own therapist every day, and you start to hear the stories underneath before it gets to the mouth, and then you can do the reconfiguring. And so that's what you're changing anger, not at the emotional level. You're controlling your behavior, but you're working at the conceptual level where you start to hear, what is anger saying? I mean, this is the rest of the night we can talk about this, or the morning. Anger isn't just a physical feeling, the heart beating, the eyes wide, the vomiting words out the mouth, the tears coming. That's the only time we notice anger. That's the wheels falling off. Anger is this conceptual story that I've trained my mind in, and it's the response to when attachment doesn't get what it wants. So what does anger say? So Miffy's mean to me. How dare you say that to me, Miffy? I don't deserve it. So if I'm doing my analysis, even if it's in my mind I'm saying this, not to her face, I've got to analyze. Let's look at the philosophy of anger. What is anger saying? Anger saying, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. There's so much in that statement that we can do analysis of. This is Buddhist being your own therapist. So I've got the view of karma. I've got the view of Buddha's model of the mind. First of all, I question the karmic one. Well, Robina, I must have this is how you work on yourself. I don't do this in Miffy. This is my work. Well, you know very well, Robina, you've got a strong karmic connection with Miffy. It's from countless past lives. We've been together. We're ancient Dharma sisters, and we're very close. So naturally, it's always your family you get mad at. So when I say, how dare you do that to me? I don't deserve it. That's a load of rubbish, Robina. What are you talking about? I created the cause. This is my garden. I created it. Miffy's in my garden. And at this moment in time, some weed popped up. Who created that weed? Well, Robina, you did, honey. So you do this, whatever the words are you use, using karma. So already you're calming your story down. You're loosening the grip of this fixed view of I don't deserve it. You know it's past karma. So then you eat it, you take it, you've grown up. Then I look more deeply. Well, what's underneath anger? Anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants. Okay, what's the philosophy of attachment? This little hungry, little bottomless pit of little hungry me. This is emotional hunger, that frantic assumption, this poor panic attack little me that always wants what I want every second. All the time, this poor attachment is the deeper one to get to. I can see in my life, because anger was always my first response, I never saw the attachment. So when you hear that anger is the response when attachment doesn't get what it wants, and I've learned to harness my anger over the years, then I'm left naked with this little hungry little Robina in here, always wants what she wants every second. So anger's the panic attack. Even annoyance, irritation, frustration are the mild versions of when you don't get what you want. When you drop the cup, you get annoyed. I've never met a person yet who doesn't get annoyed when they drop the cup, or when the mean sound happens, or the husband doesn't say the right thing, or he chews his breakfast too loud, or the kid doesn't answer you perfectly. The baby things. The response to that attachment not getting it once, that's anger, but it's mild versions. And you kind, nice people have these as well, but you don't notice, because who pays attention? You don't go to your therapist, oh, I got annoyed today. She'll tell you to shut up and come back when you want to kill your husband, because we don't notice anger at a subtler level. Then when you've calmed the anger, the aversion, the upset down, how dare that happen to me, I don't deserve it, then you get to the attachment, little hungry little me in there. And you'd have to take care of that poor little hungry me. She's been weeping for eons trying to get what she wants. That's the source of it. So where's the logic to that? I only deserve the good things, she says. Anger says, I don't deserve the bad things. She says that. They're a load of rubbish. They've got no basis in reality. They're conceptual stories that we have made up. And you want to go even deeper. What are those two rooted in? The conceptual story, the philosophy of the self-existent, real, solid, concrete, findable, pointable me. Then you think about emptiness and you uproot that one. This is being a Buddhist, babies. This is Buddhist therapy. I always shout, I realise. Maybe you can turn your volume down. But are we communicating, everybody? This is Buddhist being your own therapist. This is not Jung. This is not Freud. This is amazing Buddha. I think he's the best person on the planet. Excuse me.
So then there's a question from Pauline of, should we then rethink self-care as being compassionate for ourselves first and then compassion for others?
Of course.
Who are trying also to manage their emotions.
But of course, darling, but compassion for yourself, if you're trying to teach someone else tennis and you're not very good at it, because you haven't worked on your own tennis, then you're going to get exhausted, aren't you? You won't know how to answer their questions. You'll be very limited. They'll take advantage of you because you don't know very good tennis. So then you think, I must take care of myself. You can go home and have a hot bath and have a massage. But honey, that doesn't help you teach tennis. You've got to learn tennis, and that's hard work. You've got to do push-ups and jogging and train in tennis. If you want to call that being compassionate to yourself, then you can call it that. But it's much more powerful than that. It's being a good tennis player, being your own therapist, knowing your own mind, abiding by the laws of karma. This is full-on intensive work. But when you know the benefits that you're going to become the best tennis player on the planet, you'll be very excited. Look at the people who work day and night on training in their tennis and their gymnastics. And these little 4-year-olds, they're about, a thumb, as big as a thumb. They go to 4 a.m, they're up there doing their gymnastics all morning before school. They don't look like they're being compassionate to themselves. They look like they're completely exhausted. So it's not just relaxing that's being kind to yourself. It's knowing what you can become. You can become the best tennis player, the best Buddha, the best happy person, because the result of doing the inner work, the best tennis player here, as the analogy, is a happy, blissful, joyful, content, marvelous, happy, fulfilled human being. That's the end result. Keep that in mind, then that's how you become that, not just by having a bath and a massage.
So, Venerable Robina, if we send all of our little 4-year-olds off to like do assertiveness training and practice patience, everyone would go, oh, that's a bit rough.
That's right, wouldn't they? Exactly. That's the point. So it really takes time to think this through. You've got to know the benefits of why you're living in vows. But because we're all little fundamentalists who think that the God or mummy or daddy or some person is going to punish us, we've got this ridiculous dualistic view of punishment and reward. So when we hear about living in vows and controlling our body and controlling our speech, we think, that's not fair. I've got to suffer, do I? Well, no, I mean, even as when we hear Buddha say we've got to give up attachment, as Lama Zopa says, oh, you mean I've got to give up my heart? I've got to give up my happiness? No! You just got to work hard at giving up the garbage. The end result is a happy, blissful, joyful, fulfilled you. Then compassion's easy peasy, falling off a log easy.
So, Venerable, when I first heard the word renunciation, I didn't hear the word. I heard no more fun.
That's exactly right. Everybody's the same. Because we've got this fundamentalist, dualistic view of punishment and reward. And when you add to that, these Tibetans who've been stuck behind their mountains for, 2,000 years, for 1,000 years with the Dharma, and they still talk like 10th century fundamentalists. I mean, they're more hell-raising than the Baptists, I tell you. So it's good. That's why we had to have Lama Yeshe tell us in nice, soft words. I mean, I'm sounding like fundamentalist. I'm saying nice, soft words, but fundamentalist soundings. So I shout all the time.
So there's a question here from Roxanne that she says they have a friend who is $80,000 in debt and about to be married, and the bride has no idea. And so they love the groom dearly, but they don't want to be part of the lies and the deceit. So how should she chat to the groom from a Buddhist perspective?
So this is a friend of the groom and the bride doesn't know he's got $80,000 of debt.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's asking me how long is a piece of string. I want to know how close you are to the groom. Is he your beloved friend? Is he distant?
Yeah, really close to the groom.
Oh my God! Don't muck around. Don't muck around. Then, be honest. Say what you like. He might listen. You can't change him, but be honest. But I mean, on the other hand, you can only give him a piece of advice, and then it's up to him and it's up to her, because that's the trouble with attachment. We leap in the deep end thinking everybody's a saint. She thinks she sort of probably thinks he's the ant's pants or the, better than sliced bread. She's going to find out. So you can be honest with him, but it doesn't mean he'll listen. If he's so living in denial and maybe, I mean, it's hard. You've got to know his mind. But that's again coming from wisdom. You've got to know his mind. You've got to know how to help him. And that's your wisdom that tells you that. So, but don't assume he'll change. Don't hold your breath.
And I mean, there's also the element that if we're in a situation like that and we don't say anything, in a way we're condoning it or we're part of it, aren't we?
That's not true. We are not. I disagree completely. We love to think this is compassion. We love to go around the world and make people do what we think is valid. I mean, for example, okay. There must be plenty of people right now who are going to get married to an innocent wife with $80,000 of debt or 10 times more, or they're rapists or they're murderers or they're terrorists or who knows what. That's happening all over the world. But it's only because we know one of them that we think we should stick our nose in. I mean, anytime a person, I'm not being rude here, but hear my point, the only time we ever start a foundation to help poor people or a foundation to help innocent babies is when our baby has been insulted, when our baby has been raped, when our house has been burnt down. It's happening around the world all the time, but we couldn't care less because it doesn't touch our lives. So it's not coming from a compassion to try and help the other person. It's coming from our own attachment. To stick our nose in other people's business. Sticking your nose in other people's business because it's attachment, but helping other people from compassion, that's different. But it doesn't mean you can help people. Look at the whole world. The whole world's everywhere needing advice. But who wants advice? Nobody. It doesn't mean just closing your eyes and not caring. We assume that's the other extreme. No, you have to be wise. You have to know, is a person, are they your friend? I mean, you can't just walk up in the street and say to a person, because you're a nutritionist, you don't just walk up to a person who's 20 kilos overweight and start giving advice. They'll sue you. But mind your own business. It's a two-way thing. You've got to have a friend who wants advice. Then if you've got advice to give, then you don't just shove it down their throat. They need to want the advice and be ready for it. Well, this fellow might not be ready. You'll find out, and you'll alienate him. That's up to you to try. But we sort of take this arrogant sense of responsibility. That's not what being a bodhisattva is. Bodhisattvas want to help everyone on the planet, but they've got the patience and the perseverance to wait for the right time and the right conditions. And they help in other ways. So maybe just be kind to your friend. You can't make everybody better. It's attachment in us that wants to make everybody nice. We think it's compassion. It's not, I promise. And you won't know that until you've seen your own mind in the wisdom wing. How can you distinguish a bad backhand from a good backhand if you haven't learned it yourself? That's what gives you wisdom to know how to help others. Compassion is the wish to help others, but it doesn't give you the ability to help others. That's wisdom. And compassion is not enough, His Holiness says. That's why you need wisdom. You've got to understand this wisdom wing approach. It's not how we think in the West. It's quite a difficult one. But once we get it, it's a revelation.
Yeah, well, isn't it even that from the Buddhist point of view, it's wisdom that supports compassion?
That's the point.
Whereas in the West, it's kind of the opposite, isn't it? We think of it as the opposite.
We think it as the opposite, exactly, yeah. The wisdom is what gives you power and strength and clarity, removes your own junk, removes your own rubbish, removes your own neurosis, removes your own ego, removes your own attachment and anger and neurosis and all the rubbish that blinds you from helping others, that prevents you from helping others. So if we walk around trying to help everybody, but it's driven by our own attachment and our own needs, we will make a mess. But when you've done your own work on your own mind and rid yourself of your own attachment, your own anger, your own neuroses, then the compassion is much more powerful and you would never be misused. We're always used as a doormat because we haven't worked on our own mind. We're full of attachment and neediness. That's why we get exhausted. That's why these poor doctors and nurses killing themselves working in the hospitals. Not in Australia, because there's not that many deaths, but the deaths in America still, it's like thousands every day. All the poor nurses and doctors and the helpers in the hospitals exhausted, drained from the suffering and killing themselves. And this is not being rude. This is not because of compassion. It's because not knowing how to deal with their own anxiety, their own stress, their own fears, their own attachment, and their own anger. We don't have methods like this in our culture. The only methods we have is go home and have a good sleep. That's not enough.
Yeah, and also it seems like compassion is viewed as an added extra or something that you have when it's economical, and then, if it's not economically feasible, then
yes,
we'll just have to wait.
So I understand. Well, our compassion, it's, anyway, yes, whatever. Go on. What else, Miffy? What other people have to say? Questions? What's happening?
I think the whole thing of having compassion and respect training and in kindergarten hit a hallelujah moment.
God. Wonderful. What else, people?
So... just reading. So another one. No, that's it. That's it for the questions.
All right. Okay, people. We're talking about everything here, but this is the one that just takes time to hear this. I didn't know what they meant when I first heard the Lamas talking about working on my mind, becoming less angry. You get so overwhelmed by your own emotions and feelings. You don't know what they are, and you shoot your mouth off too much. Then you have all this guilt and all this drama, and then you have all this attachment to how people like you and don't like you. We're so overwhelmed by our own selves. We're drowning in our misery. It's very hard to get our head up out of it so we can start to get some clarity. Really, it's sort of like, it's very difficult. And so a lot of the problem is the anger against ourselves. This is the thing. If we didn't have much anger against ourselves, if we didn't have much low self-esteem, it's easy to get rid of attachment and anger because you can identify the problem immediately. But as soon as we hear that we're angry and attached, we start getting all defensive. What do you mean I'm angry? What do you mean I'm attached? I'm allowed to be angry. Look what happens to me. It's not my fault. We have all this packaging, all this baggage in here, so strong. It just takes time to unpack. So yeah, we've got to be gentle with ourselves. Yes, we've got to have a good massage and a weep. We must do that while we're doing this hard work, practicing tennis 8 hours a day. It's exhausting. So this is where the long-term goal is. Why are you playing tennis? The analogy of why am I working on my mind? So I can stop suffering. Absolutely, you must remember that. So I can become a tennis player. So then why? The big one is so I can be of benefit to others. And in the beginning, that's very distant, This idea of compassion, when I read Lama Zopa talking about bodhicitta, it's just kind of ridiculous how high it is. It's just like impossible to think. I could be like never sleeping day and night, only having compassion for others. And then by even the lowest level bodhisattva, in this book of Rinpoche's that came out recently that we did as a fundraiser for the prison project, Rinpoche asked me, to put together as a book all these 20 years of letters he's written to prisoners, right? So he did it as a narrative. It's not like as letters, but it's all done as a book, like the structure of the Lam Rim, really. And it's just amazing advice from which he writes. I mean, one prisoner got a letter of 45 typed pages. I mean, he must have spent weeks, and he's got a folder there of 2,000 letters, people who write to him. He's unbelievable. So in this, in all these letters, is advice to these prisoners, and in one of them, a long discussion of what the qualities of a Buddha are. That this just literally is like science fiction. Even the lowest level bodhisattva, who's already realized emptiness, the lowest level bodhisattva, they've done the wisdom wing. I mean, that's gone into the ancient past. They've gone beyond attachment, anger, jealousy, pride, got perfect ethics, an amazingly blissful mind. Because remember, the tennis player analogy is a blissful mind. You become this blissful person, happy person, content person, fulfilled person, kind of self-confident person. That's the tennis player we're talking about. That's the person you can become, but it's hard to hear it. So there are these amazing blissful beings beyond delusions, completely beyond delusions, completely beyond delusions, blissfully joyful, with unbelievable compassion and love, gone and now even got the bodhicitta, which is only existing for others. This is what is driving their minds fully. They are utterly joyful. They do not suffer. How can you suffer? You see, suffering isn't having a headache. Suffering is because of attachment and anger. That's a whole different, that's an amazing discussion, that one. You don't suffer when you're a bodhisattva. Dalai Lama, although he weeps every day when the Tibetans come across the mountains, he's not suffering. Suffering is the result of delusions, of a neurotic mind. They've gone beyond neurotic mind. So then you've got these lowest level bodhisattva who've realized emptiness. They're able to manifest their mind in 100 forms simultaneously. I mean, 100 different forms. It sounds like science fiction, more clever than science fiction. I mean, the Star Trek's nothing in comparison with what the bodhisattvas can do. And that's the lowest level bodhisattva. And they've got clairvoyance to see the minds of hundreds of past lives, whoever they see. We can't even imagine the potential of our mind, the way Buddhism talks. I mean, neuroscientists do not talk about the potential of your mind. Well, they sort of do. They say we use a few percentage points of our brain. It's a good way of putting it. But this is inconceivable. And then you hear people like Lama Zopa, when he had a stroke, he's laughing and joyful, and happily wanting to take on the suffering of all beings. It's like exhausting just thinking about it. So when you're in the beginning of the path and you're overwhelmed by your own misery and your own self-pity and your own patheticness and you're jealous and you're angry, you want to have a sleep all day. I mean, in the beginning, when you start this rubbish, not rubbish, that popped out wrong. Just start this amazing path. You can't see past your own nose. And then you see Lama Zepa and Lama Yeshe and Dalai Lama up on these pedestals. How can I get up there, It's overwhelming. So honestly, it's only really because I tell you, and Lama Zopa told me in 1987, I've been a monk, not a monk, I'm a nun, aren't I? I've been a nun for 10 years. And he told me my job, I was in New Zealand. It was very funny. In New Zealand, and I mean, Lama Yeshe, I knew he was we talked about mentor here, didn't we? We used that word, didn't we? Was it here in this class? Did we talk about the word mentor, Miffy? Oh,
no,
somewhere else. It was an alternative word to guru. Anyway, never mind, doesn't matter. But I'd already recognised Lama Yeshe as my guru for 10 years. And I knew Lama Zopa was. I had a dream I had a dream and someone said, oh, that's the Lama who leads you to enlightenment. And I was very surprised. But it took me 10 years to recognise him. Anyway, I was in New Zealand. Now I've said so many words in between, I've lost the reason why I'm talking to you. Oh, yeah. Anyway, the big story short, keep it short. He told me, I didn't know what I was going to do. I'd finished working for Wisdom Publications. I'd been doing it for 10 years. I was in Melbourne. Then I went to New Zealand to do this retreat, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I'd been 10 years working for Wisdom, and the job had finished. And then he called me up to his room, and it reminds me of Michelangelo. That painting of God, the fingers? That one. Mm-hmm. I remember Lama Zopa said, out of the blue, he said, pointed his finger, he said, that's how I remember it, go to Sydney and teach, he said. I was shocked out of my mind. He told me to go teach. I'd done a bit of study, Anyway, what I'm getting at is, long story, this ridiculous story, just to point out, he told me to do this job in 1987. And I was very surprised. I thought, what am I going to do, So I was nervous. And I thought to myself, what if I run out of words? And I get nervous. So I made two decisions. I thought to myself, I will teach. I'll just talk as if I'm talking to one person. Then you don't get nervous talking to one person, do you? So I decided I'd teach like I'm talking to one person. And then second, I thought, if I run out of words, I'll say, okay, any questions? That's what I've been doing. That's what I've been doing for 32 years, 33. It works fine. So my point is, what I'm trying to get at is this. Any common sense that I can bring to these words I'm saying to express this path is only because he made me in 1987 have to get it out of my mouth. So who do you think is listening all these 37, 8, 9, 10? That's 34 years now. Who's been listening, you think, all these years? Who do you think has been listening all these years? Moi. I mean, this is the point. I'm so grateful he's given me this job. That's why I always thank everybody coming. I'd look very stupid talking to myself, wouldn't I? So you give me an excuse to talk to myself. All the lamas say at the end of all these holy yogis, they always say at the end of their little poems, and then this is really written for myself. And if there's any benefit for anybody else, that's a bonus. That's exactly how I feel, I tell you. So because I've got this fanatic mind that likes details and to get things clear, then all these 37 years having to teach, or 34, I'm getting it clearer myself, a little bit that I understand, because I have got to express it to myself. So all I'm getting at is it takes time. This path is so outrageous. And what's encouraging, wait a minute, Miffy. Miffy's the best questioner of all the courses I ever do in the 70 FPMT centres. Miffy, no question, is the best. We basically have when I come to Langri Tangpa, I have conversations with Miffy. And they're very useful because she's a great person to have a conversation with. Let me just finish, then you can ask me another question. So it just takes time of wanting to know that you've got this potential, knowing you've got this potential, knowing you've got to distinguish between your rubbish and somebody else's rubbish, this kind of brutal mind of getting clarity every day, every second. What's your body? What's your speech? What's your mind? What's mine and what's Miffy's? When this begins to become clear, some sanity comes, and then to know you've got this amazing potential and to never give up on yourself and to have courage. Yes, Miffy?
Okay, so there's a couple of questions about what's been happening recently in Australia. So Jeanette's saying that she gets really angry reading all the news items in Australia about the sexual assaults and harassment in the Australian Parliament.
Yeah,
and, the misogyny and tone deafness of our politicians.
I know.
So,
but I mean, okay, who's asking the question?
Or is it from, it's actually coming from Jeanette, but there's a couple of other people that have said here in the question.
Right,
so
exactly.
How do we sort out whether it's from attachment, from anger, which bits is, our sense of justice, and
I understand. This is why, you're asking me, how do I distinguish between a forehand and a good forehand, a forehand and a backhand? You're asking me that, aren't you? Well then, darling, there's no shortcut. You have to play tennis. You have to learn tennis. So I'll try my best to explain it. But in the end, the words I'm saying here are based upon this view in Buddhism that we have the neurotic, deluded, eye-based, fear-based, poisonous, depressing, anxious, making, neurotic, ridiculous states of mind, and the love and compassion and wisdom and kindness. And the tragedy is they're mixed like a big soup together. Not even the veggies bumping into each other, but they're pureed soup. So it takes time. That's why I said the thing, me for talking this stuff for 34 years, beginning to comprehend it now. So it just takes time to distinguish. That's why the first job has to be at least to not vomit the words out. And that even means just to, not vomit the words out. Then it means beginning to do some practice every day so you can, and then learn the Buddhist model of the mind, learn tennis, so that you can then begin to notice, my goodness, that's attachment, there's anger, there's jealousy, there's love, there's compassion. It's stupendously difficult. But the general answer, darling, is that until we're highly advanced, there's going to be some levels of attachment and anger. Don't think you can do a pure action of no attachment and anger. You can't, it's not possible. But it's a gradual process of lessening those and a gradual process of increasing the good stuff until eventually the good stuff takes over. It just doesn't just switch overnight. It's not like you can, someone tells you how to play the piano. It's an ongoing process of playing it not so badly and an ongoing process of playing it better and better until better and better wins the day. So it's a gradual, ongoing process of being conscious, of observing, of noticing. And that implies you've got to know what attachment is. You've got to know what anger is, even theoretically. Then we have the basis of observing. But a good indicator is if you're agitated, and then join the club. Everybody knows what I'm talking about. If you're agitated, it proves it's anger. And it's attachment, because all the delusions are rooted in fear and neurosis and panic and drama. So this is why this is such a sophisticated model, because this is normal for us in the West. So not to feel bad about it, but to recognize it and to know it. And the other point is this, it's like, what are we surprised? In a way, it's sort of like when we start to become conscious, let's say of politics. Let's say politics. Let's say before, when we were 15, who cared what the Australian Parliament did? They can all be these sexist white fat men, white men, get my point, jumping on all their secretaries every day. We didn't know and we didn't care. But listen to this. It's only when we start to become conscious that we notice, isn't it? But it's always been happening. And since history, since the beginning of this time of humanity, the white, the bosses in the world, all the men, and in particular of all the other men, the white men are the bosses of all the other men. So this is how the world has been since beginningless time. But it's only when we start to notice that babies are getting hurt, that women are being abused, that men jump on there something, that the bad things happen. But it's always been there. So then, of course, in the beginning we get all enthusiastic and excited about it. But then, okay, so that's the broader answer. I mean, it's just I'm making general points. There's no quick fix. Of course it's the way it is. Why are we surprised? That's why Martin Luther King, look at especially in America, but it's Australia, it's exactly the same with race. Look at how hard the down group has to work for the up group to even listen. I mean, when you're in the up group, you're as thick as a post. You don't want to listen to these pathetic low people. Men have no interest in listening to women. White people have no interest in listening to black people. It's just the way the world is structured. So you've got to fight your way up to get some justice. So look at the suffering in the States. As for example, the States. It's exactly the same in Australia. Fighting and fighting and fighting. And I remember when I was involved in political activity back in the 70s, there's hardly any difference now, People are very entrenched. We are all entrenched in our own delusions, our own attachment. So the people in Parliament, or the white racist, or the white supremacist, you name it, or the sexist, because we've got attachment, we've got arrogance, we've got hubris, we think we're right, and poo-hoo to the lower people. So if you're in the lower group, there's two jobs you have to do. One is fight for your rights, nothing wrong. As Martin Luther King said, it is good to be angry. He meant it is good to see the faults. Look at the racism. Look at the poverty. But then you don't just rant and rave. I'm saying that, which is what normal anger is. You then say, what can I do to help? And Dalai Lama one time, he said, in some interview, the person said, that the journalist said, it looks like anger is useful. And he meant volatile, action energy, political activity. If it's anger, it looks like it's useful. The Dalai Lama said, I know what you mean, but if it's only really anger, which is short-lived, it doesn't last. Anger is like a big explosion, and then you give up, and then you can't be bothered. But he said, if it's coming from compassion, which can also be strong, then you will never give up. So this is the gradual process. We have to go first internally, and then be a political activist. I mean, in a sense, in my life, I've always been a political activist. But just a different emphasis now. We all should do that. But much of the time, like this thing of trying to change that fellow who's $80,000 in debt, everybody's like that. Everybody's doing rubbish. Everybody's killing animals and humans and raping babies. It's happening all over the universe. It's only when we notice it that we start getting a bit panic-stricken. So to first work on our own mind. Then if you decide you want to be one of the people to help change Parliament, to help change the racism, to help change suffering of animals, I mean, there's plenty of causes out there. Then you do your own mind first, work on yourself, see your attachment, see your anger, and then get out there and work and persevere, and gradually you'll chip away at the world. Meanwhile, you've got to work on your own mind and work on the outside. You've got to do both wings, I'm just giving very general, broad answers here. I'm not giving any magic tricks.
So, Venerable Robina, then is it right then to frame it, say that as human beings we all have an innate sense of fairness, but then something like this comes along and say as women, then because it affects us, then we feel like, who decided women were worth less or but we're blind to the rest. Say, for instance, we're not thinking about children who are oppressed or about boys being, bullied or told they can't cry and to man up. We're just thinking about, we just notice the injustice when it affects us.
It's true. It is true. And that's okay if we start to get the bigger picture. So on the other hand, It is, but I know for me, for my political activity actions, first I was a Catholic, then I was a hippie, and a serious hippie philosophically. Then I was a radical lefty, demonstrating, getting arrested on Fleet Street, all this drama. It was all about the poor people and the rich people. Then gradually it was black politics, supporting all the Black Panthers in the early 70s. All the Black Panthers had a group in London. We were working for this, we had big, massive demonstrations. It was all about the injustice of the world. That recent movie, have you seen it on Netflix, that amazing movie? About never mind, don't worry about the movie, but that was a really serious amount of work, all about and also the injustice of all the imperialists all over the world, the white races dominating the black races and so on and so forth. And then moved into being a feminist. So I was involved in all of it. But what was interesting was, I'm not poor, I'm not working class, I'm not black. So it was good I did all that, but when it became really serious for me, I'm a female. So the feminist part was the most intense part of the evolution of my own mind, and that's what led me to my spiritual path, because I am female. So all of them were good, but when it can be your own thing, that's what's most profound. So black people in Australia, you've got to fight for your rights, but you can see it in everybody's own evolution. They've got to fight for their own rights externally, but at the same time you're working on yourself internally when you stop asking people to change, but you start taking control of yourself. And that's in every culture. Now look for years and years Hollywood, you never saw a damn black movie because all the white men ran the show. Now women are doing things. Now black people are making the most amazing movies. So you go through this evolution in yourself. You're a victim, you're enraged, you try to bash the world into shape, but you work on yourself and you grow this amazing human being, and then you're able to easily do the job of taking your own power and helping others as well. So it's this evolution we have to go through. If it's only the self-centered one, like you've lived a happy life all your life and your baby gets raped. I'm always use extreme examples, get my point. You'd never thought of other rape babies ever once in your life before. You lived in this hubris of this beautiful suburb, the best, richest, lovely people. You couldn't care less about other people suffering. But that's the downside. But if that can help you then get real compassion for everybody, it's a good thing. It's a wake-up call. But if it just remains an obsession to now forevermore, because everyone always says, I want to make sure that it never happens to anybody else. That's beyond naive. It's going to happen until endless time, until we change our minds, until we give up attachment and anger and neurosis, because they are the source of all happiness in the universe. This is why you can never jump over that step,
So in Australia, there was this series on, I think it was ABC or SBS, I'm not sure, called Redfern Now. So that was
I heard about it. I didn't see it, but I saw it.
Quite amazing,
That's right, exactly.
Australian Aborigines.
Exactly.
But I mean, part of this is if you're oppressed and downtrodden, all this unfairness is happening, and it's almost like you've got the least resources emotionally.
Exactly.
But you're the one that has to actually do the work.
But you've got to do the work, and that's why when we did the women's thing, I remember being in the 70s and I was a radical feminist. We had this consciousness raising. That was the internal work we did. That's the same with when you're black. You've got to raise your own consciousness. This is the wisdom wing. This is the wisdom wing. You raise your own consciousness so you can help yourself. Then you can help others. But if you sit there in politics being a complete victim, raging, wanting to sue everybody and never change your own mind, nothing will ever change. You'll go mad, you'll kill yourself or kill someone else.